Hello and welcome to Business Connections, a program put on by the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Holly Allen, Director of Marketing and Communications for the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. And I have two special guests with me today. In this past November, we saw a lot of change with the election, a lot of different elected officials coming into office. But one of those congressmen had actually been in office for a few months and had to rerun for the election, and that was Congressman Warren Davidson. He took Boehner's place. Speaker Boehner stepped down from the House, and then in June, you took over and have a few months under your belt, and then you had to run again. So we're here to talk with Congressman Davidson about his experiences coming into office and what sort of priorities he has ahead of him. So welcome. Thank you for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
And I also have my colleague here, Chris Kershner, who's the Vice President of Economic Development and Public Policy with the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce, for a little insight from our point of view. Thanks for being with me, Chris.
Thanks, Holly.
Congressman Davidson, I want to talk to you about your unusual experience, I guess. So you've had a busy year. You came into office in June, you got a couple months under your belt, and then you had to turn around and run again in November after that special election. What was that like?
It was a lot of campaigning. So in the fall last year, I was not planning to run for Congress. So really right around this time last year, right after Thanksgiving, I started looking seriously at, well, who's likely to be our next congressman? A couple people had said, hey, why don't you think about doing it? So I started to take a serious look at it and put together a campaign. So December 16th, we filed and had a 90-day sprint, basically because the field had already formed. A lot of the campaign was already underway. So we had essentially two primaries that took place on March 15th, one for the special in June and one for the general here in November, or back in November. So a lot of campaigning up till then. 15 Republicans in that primary. We won that by about 8%. So it was a nice win, given a pretty crowded field. A lot of good folks in the race, so it was definitely an honor to win the primary. And then right after that, went into a little bit of downtime, a very different field because there was so much energy in the primary.
Right.
As a presidential primary, turnout was pretty big, 40% more than normal. And then the special was, Ohio never has an election in June.
Right.
No one even knew there was an election. We were like, hey, there's a special election. And, people were like, well, yeah, good luck in November. And all this stuff was like, well, don't forget to vote in June. So
right.
Very low turnout, but won that one, 78%, something like that. So
wow.
It was a nice win.
Right.
We were doing a little more than the other guys in terms of pushing turnout, so that's a little higher than average in the district. So then, June 7th won that. June 9th took office, and
wow,
there's
turnaround.
No real transition. Yeah,
right.
So had 3 hours of orientation. I'm on the floor swearing. They go, here's a voting card, and then I have to go vote.
Wow.
So it wasn't like the normal path where people that won on November 8th right now have a transition until January 3rd. They'll swear in on January 3rd.
Right.
So you got to find a way to build a team, hire people, have somebody present in the offices to answer the phones. So it was a pretty big whirlwind.
Was there any interaction there with Mr. Boehner as you kind of transitioned and took office?
Sure, a little bit. He congratulated me right after the primary win, and then we met in April. He spent a fair bit of the winter in Florida, and we met in April. He came up, spent about an hour and a half talking, gave me a little bit of his input, and then we started getting input from lots of folks, but have to find a way to make it work. But get our staff together, got a First Amendment in and passed before we took off in July for the presidential primaries, and then an August work period back in the district. So in August, we brought the whole newly formed staff to Ohio, everyone from DC, because some of the people from other parts of the country, they're not from right here in the district, but they're
right.
working in the DC office. And then we've also got a district staff, so we wanted everyone to get to know one another and find a way to work together. So we brought them out here for 2.5 days, 3 days during the week of the Darke County Fair. So fairs, go see that. Darke County is the largest and one of the largest county fairs anywhere.
Right, right.
So came out, spent a little bit of time at that, but spent a lot of time planning on how to work with one another, what kinds of things we would be focused on, and then we've been functioning in the office. Took October, put together another campaign, and had good success on November 8th. So a little bit of that, looking forward to really being focused on
Right.
policy side right now.
You've had more than your fair share of campaigning, that's for sure.
Well, for first year, sure.
Yeah. Can you tell us that as you were traveling around campaigning, I'm sure you got to know your district pretty well, District 8. Can you tell us about what you know about the district you're representing?
Well, yeah, so there's a little over 700,000 people, about 725,000 people in a congressional district. So, you know, it's not possible to get to know all of them, but it's a pretty diverse district. I mean, it's all ring counties, so there's not, you know, an urban core like Dayton or Cincinnati in it, but with some solid sized cities, Springfield, Middletown, Hamilton. Those are some of the larger cities, but some growing, you know, big growth in Westchester and Liberty Township.
Absolutely.
Great education. We've got Miami University, we've got Wittenberg, we've got Clark State, Edison State, some great high school programs, but some unique approaches like Butler Tech. So, you know, when you talk about workforce, there's a lot of resources out there. And then just phenomenal employers, a lot of great strength in the economy. Manufacturing is big and growing and healthy. And ag, we've got a really nice ag, the second largest poultry producer in the country. So we've, you know, big in eggs, big in poultry in Mercer County and Darke County in particular. So it's a nice, strong overall economy, a lot of great families, a lot of great people. And then some of the same challenges that people have in the midst of good success. You know, probably everybody would remember locally would remember this 7-year-old boy who police picked up in Franklin,
Right.
Which isn't in our district, but you know, just selling a teddy bear for food. And here in the midst of a reasonably, this isn't an incredibly poor area, but we have pockets. And so some of that's out there, taking a tour of Medicaid facilities, talk to people that are really very burdened by the heroin crisis. That's one of the big surprises it's not just a urban, rural, rich, poor, doesn't break down by race. It's a real challenge. And so, you know, you start to deal with problems that, you know, day to day, we haven't necessarily come into contact with personally, but as you really start getting into the representative role and listening and talking to people, there's a lot to be thankful for, a lot of good successes, and then some challenges.
Right. And you talk about the economy, which of course, you know, fuels how healthy our communities are. And of course, at the Chamber, we love seeing people with a business background take office. And you have that kind of background. And since this is kind of a getting to know you, new Congressman, can you tell us about your experience and your background in business, in particular in manufacturing?
Yeah, thanks for that. So in 2000, I was an Army officer. I was really thought I would be a career soldier, career Army officer. But I was looking at, well, what am I going to do? I had decided to get out, which is a whole separate story. And I had gone to consider taking a job as a plant manager just outside of Chicago for a big, you know, multi-billion-dollar, you know, multinational company, and had a good career path and everything else. And it was right before Easter of 2000. Came home and my dad said, hey, why don't you come work with me? And he had about 20 people in a small job shop. And I was like, well, you know, Dad, I'm, you know, so on and so forth. And took a tour through the shop, and his shop foreman at the time said, I think all them computers are a fad, which is a real quote. And I thought, that'd probably make a difference here. So I told him I would give him a year, went to work with him, and then, you know, we wanted to change a lot. He had 4 stamping presses at that time, and I felt like that was the area we should focus on. Started getting wins there, and in 2002 I started a separate company. Wasn't quite ready to change all the way. That was complementary in terms of supplying the stamping business with tooling.
Okay.
Then I went and picked up an MBA from Notre Dame and bought my dad's business from him. Started a couple others, bought a couple others, and just kept growing little by little.
So a real entrepreneur. Kind of.
A little bit, you know, some with the startups, some with acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, can you talk a little bit about why we believe it's so important to have people, business-minded folks who have real experience in the business world, to have elected positions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know, Holly, and as Congressman Davidson knows, we're a business organization, so we are advocating for the priorities of the Dayton area business community. We are advocating for the priorities of our 2,600 members when I'm in Washington, D.C. or when I'm in Columbus. And when you have somebody there who is friendly to your business community, who knows your business community, doesn't mean that they're going to support or they're going to oppose everything you want them to support or oppose, but somebody who already knows the issues and knows the challenges that business owners face on a regular basis makes my job a lot easier. It makes my job a lot easier, and it makes it easier because we view that person as somebody who is knowledgeable of the industry. And by the industry, I mean the business community as a whole in Washington. And having somebody like Congressman Davidson there who knows that business owners are putting all the risk out there, knows that entrepreneurs are putting their life savings on the line so that they can make payroll and employ another person for the next day. And he knows the political capital that it takes for business owners, that the time they give up with their families to help their businesses succeed. Having somebody there with that background, that knowledge, is extremely important to us because they know the issues already going in. And when we are going to talk to Congressman Davidson about our issues, he's hopefully already knowledgeable about some of those challenges.
Would you say that's fair? Do you think that experience will stick with you as you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I got there, we've done the number of people that don't truly understand even a balance sheet. I mean, there are members of both parties that have convinced themselves that deficits don't matter, and running a business is a really good way to find out that deficits do matter.
Right.
And I don't think governments are immune to that. Just signing the front side of a paycheck as an employer is a big deal, as you alluded to, and the number of members of Congress that have done that is small. Really, trade is important. It's a very important part of our economy and the strength of our economy. And so we've been on, we've participated in, we've shipped products all over the United States, into Canada, into Mexico. Picked up a recognition from Governor Taft when he was governor for export excellence. So being able to export from Ohio, and that's one of the great strengths of our region because we have such a great transportation infrastructure and a great workforce that we can be productive right here and ship to a lot of places. So our companies were able to ship into Mexico. And learning about that theoretically is really different than having lived it and done it. And so I think that'll carry over and be valuable.
What would you like to see the federal government do to help small businesses succeed?
I think the number one thing is to fix our corporate tax code. As I like to say, it's not like Tim Cook, who's the CEO of Apple, or Mark Zuckerberg, are generally considered right-wing ideologues. If anything, they're on the left ideologically, but they hold hundreds of billions of dollars of cash, a couple hundred between the two of their companies, offshore. Because our corporate tax code's broken. I mean, they're rational people. It's not ideology that's driving these kinds of things. And so, frankly, Budweiser's owned by a Belgian company right now. And before, some guy in Dublin owns McDonald's and Coke because they have a lot of foreign revenue. Let's fix our corporate tax code. We already have, America continues to be the world's land of opportunity. But, we have the world's best markets for goods, services, capital, intellectual property, all kinds of things, but we don't have the best place to recognize revenue and to really, all that cash that's parked offshore, even if it's not being directly invested, can be parked in the United States and that'd be available as credit facilities. I think that's one of the most important things that will drive our growth rate and really create more good jobs for people.
You spoke to chamber members just today, and you mentioned that transportation and infrastructure you think will be a big win for 2017 for the federal government. And that's something that obviously, Chris, that has been a big priority for us. Can you talk first about why our members have been so focused on that as an issue, and then I'll get to you, Congressman, and
Sure.
talk to you a little bit about your take on it.
Right, absolutely. Well, our members pay a little something called federal gas tax every single day they go to the pump. And so they are shipping dollars to Washington, D.C., and they like to see a ROI on those dollars that they're investing into transportation. Now they're investing them through their gas taxes and through other means. But seeing some of those dollars flow back here to the state that can then ultimately be invested in our aging infrastructure system is something that's extremely important to the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. We worked very hard to get the I-75 modernization project done in downtown Dayton. This just came to complete this year. It was a $370 million infrastructure investment. And the reason why the Chamber got behind it, the number one reason is because we had a manufacturer, and Congressman Davidson will appreciate this, who came to us and said, if you don't fix I-75, it's going to make my shop unattractive because I can't get just-in-time deliveries from my trucks when there's a backup on I-75. And if I can't get just-in-time deliveries, I have to shut down my line, and that makes it unattractive for us to keep our presence here in Dayton. That's a big concern for the Chamber of Commerce, right? The Chamber of Commerce wants to see business thriving, wants to see business growing. So we jumped in and helped solve that problem. And we advocated hard to get that project finished and completed. And we're proud that it did. It took 10 years. And there was a lot of orange barrels out there, but we're glad it's done now. And we're hoping those goods and commerce can be flowing a lot smoother now. And we're going to continue to work with federal government on a transportation reauthorization bill in the future. We know that's coming up here in 2020. And we want to work closely with them to make sure that that budget is made solvent and continues to be whole, and those investments in our aging infrastructure stay there. Because that's really one of the things that we feel makes this country great, is our efficient and effective transportation infrastructure system. But you got to keep investing in it. You know, if you let it rot and you let it crumble, then it's not going to be an asset anymore. It's actually going to be a detriment. And it'll be a detriment to the business community when their employees can't get around, when their folks can't, when businesses can't receive or deliver those goods they need to deliver. It can be hurtful, so we need to continue those investments.
So it's probably music to your ears that Congressman Davidson said he thought that this would be a big win for the federal government, that it wouldn't be much pushback, I guess, on this topic. Can you talk a little bit about why you believe that and why you think it will be easy to get some investment going?
Sure. Yeah. One is President-elect Trump campaigned on it, so it's a big deal to him. And two is Harry Reid is gone from the Senate, so the prospects of getting anything done in the Senate are going up because he's gone. Charles Schumer is the new Senate Minority Leader, or will be the new Senate Minority, presumably. And he has talked about the importance of doing transportation. So there's a building consensus as part of the way to do that is to deal with what I talked about earlier with the amount of cash that's offshore, and allowing some of that to be repatriated and to take those tax dollars that come in from this, not all $2 trillion will flow back, but if a significant portion comes back, you can look at the math and say, hey, there's a lot of money that's going to be available if you spend part of that money for transportation. And we already spend money as federal government on transportation, so this is a supplemental way to do it. There's a bunch of creative ways to say, what are we going to do with that? That'll be a policy debate. But the will to do transportation investment is there, and the need is there. So when you look at the existing status quo in transportation, about 30% of those tax dollars that you talk about off the fuel tax are going to things like RTA, which is helpful for some communities, but it's not, really a federal issue. It's really largely local. So those are federal funds that are going to local transportation dollars. And so a lot of the good ideas that people have had over time have crowded into what was otherwise potentially a more sustainable funding mechanism. So in the area, you talked about how important downtown is. I think in this area, particularly with I-70 and I-75, east-west, north-south, you've got an ability to reach most of the U.S. market within a one-day move. So for people that are in manufacturing or distribution, even say retail, if your distribution facility's here, we've seen lots of growth in those types of facilities in our area.
Yes.
The transportation piece is really important, and that means that you can locate and invest capital here, which is going to drive jobs. So directly, it's very important to everybody that it's here. And those jobs have multiplier effects that go out, and it drives retail, drives restaurants, drives healthcare spending, all big sectors in our economy. So I think the will's there because there's a path from the presidency and a path from the Senate. And I will say too, not just in terms of the spending, there were things under the current administration where they wanted to talk about taking away tax-favored treatment for bonds that were out there that even local governments invest as a way to raise capital to fund local projects. So not only were federal projects challenged, the funding mechanism for transportation improvement districts was at risk because there was active discussions in the IRS about treating those differently and disallowing these types of partnerships. So I think the path to doing better transportation investment, better funding mechanisms for it are going to be a lot better in the future.
You touched on a lot of industry sectors that are so important to us, logistics, manufacturing. We can't talk to you and not talk about Wright Patterson Airforce Base. It's the largest employer in our area, the largest single-site employer in the state of Ohio. It's a big priority for our business community. It's an economic engine for the area. And each year, members of our Dayton area business community, they travel to Washington, D.C. for an annual fly-in, and they talk about the importance of Wright Patterson Air Force Base. And we talk about BRAC is such a big conversation here, and we've come out on the positive side of some realignment policy. Can you talk about what we can do to ensure the continuation of successes for Wright Patterson Air Force Base, that they continue to grow and be supported by our federal government?
Yeah, great question. Wright Pat is very big, as is Springfield Air National Guard Base. And when you look at it, the number one thing is have a relevant mission. And both those facilities do. Our smaller Guard and Reserve armories do as well. So we're pretty well positioned in that sense. The number two thing is the people that are in those units have to execute well. So the community can love them, but if they're not accomplishing the mission, that's a problem. And so Secretary of Defense and other people are going to have to take that into consideration. And these guys are accomplishing their missions. They're doing great things. They have great missions in the first place. They do great work in terms of the airmen that are working on the base and the civilian employees that help those folks succeed, so accomplish the mission. And then second, you look at the community support and then the way the base is run. So you can accomplish the mission, but you can do it in a way that everyone hates being there. What they don't. Wright Pat was recognized as a top destination for the military, great community, and that starts to build the bridges between the great place to live, great place to work, just a phenomenal community to be a part of. And Ohio's done some great things for retirees in terms of creating tax favored status for people on retiree pensions. So I think we're doing a lot of great things there. And when you look at the way ahead, defense is President Obama had a policy of linking defense spending to entitlement spending and domestic spending, which is a policy decision, but it's not entirely rational. And I think going forward, we'll be able to kind of repair some of the challenges that have been a consequence of that policy. And the other thing is, I think, just getting support directly for the mission. Wright Patterson does so much with procurement. They do so much with intelligence, with the National Geospatial Institute, with cutting edge research with AFRL. All those things are big growth areas for our Department of Defense. They're really vital to the success, not just of the Air Force, but the overall defense mission. And so I feel real optimistic about it, but we'll continue to defend them. In Congress, we've got a strong delegation from Ohio. We're our own region when you look at how we organize as a conference. 16 members, hopefully we can see population growth and hold our own in the next census, because that influence matters out there.
We have just a couple of minutes left, but I don't want to let you go before I ask you, Congressman Davidson, about a bill that you introduced in September, keeping with the military topic here. We're very proud to have the Dayton VA here in our region, and you introduced a bill in September that essentially would mandate that Congress get their health care from the VA. Can you talk about that bill, where it stands now, what caused you to introduce something like that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I've had a lot of support from the public, but only one co-sponsor so far in Congress for it. So hoping to up the co-sponsors. We have a new chairman of the committee, so we'll see in the year ahead. Not much is going to happen in this lame duck period for it. So in the year ahead, hopefully we can reintroduce it. The goal is to lead by example. So Congress shall have no other health care benefit than the VA health care benefit. And that would put our members of Congress in line with our veterans, really standing in solidarity, saying, hey, we're here to make sure this gets fixed. Our veterans have earned, and I think the public wants them to have, some of the best health care in the world. And, the Dayton VA is certainly one of the best facilities in the
Absolutely.
VA. Glenn Costi, in particular, who's the leader of that facility, has been tapped numerous times to help with other facilities that have had challenges. So when Phoenix had their very public crisis a few years ago, Glenn Costi was out there on the turnaround team. when Cincinnati had a very public crisis earlier this year, Glenn Costey went down, helped with the transition team. And the challenges ahead in Cincinnati are certainly greater than the ones here in Dayton. So leadership matters. The community involvement matters, all the kinds of things that go into creating a culture and an organization. But the kind of general consensus is that the best thing to make sure that the VA improves and sustains those improvements is consistent and continual oversight. And so what better way to do that than to make sure members of Congress and their staffs, who are all over the United States, just like veterans are in and out of those facilities all the time. And then we have other programs out there that are designed to help veterans access care that isn't either timely or available at a VA facility. And so there are 7 different choice programs right now. And so I think it's a prime opportunity to kind of consolidate those 7 choice programs into one that functions, and veterans can go out and have a choice program that's high functioning. We've had veterans who've waited, we had a woman who was an Air Force veteran wait from February to August to try to qualify for a program that wasn't intended to take time to implement at all.
Right.
And then we also had people that have had their reimbursements not paid, and so it's hit their credit ratings. So when veterans come and they talk, we've had people from VAs come and talk to us about, kind of whistleblower, here's issues that we're dealing with. It's popular to say that Congress and their staffs are there because you'll see it firsthand, and then you'll get the kind of oversight that'll help change the culture.
Well, we will keep updated on that. We'll keep an eye on that bill. Thank you so much for being with us today, Congressman Davidson, Congressman Warren Davidson here with us today, and of course Chris Kershner from the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you both for being with us and talking today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about the Chamber and what we're up to, if you want to take a look at Chamber events on our calendar, you can go to DaytonChamber.org, and you can always keep up to date on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thanks so much for being with us today. Have a good day.
Today's program was a great opportunity to meet and learn more about the leadership and vision of recently elected Congressman Warren Davidson, who won the 8th Congressional District of Ohio seat, vacated by longtime Chamber friend and Speaker of the House, John Boehner. Congressman Davidson is a unique leader in several aspects. First, he is a West Point graduate and former Army officer, unique in that there are fewer and fewer men and women from the military services that hold elected office in Washington, thus allowing him a unique perspective on our military and security of our nation. Secondly, he is an experienced business owner, a person who understands the many challenges faced by America's small businesses. This gives him another unique perspective about what impacts Washington has on the Midwest business community and what he might do to help our local businesses grow. And last but not least is his manufacturing background and geographical understanding of his district. The 8th District has had the distinct pleasure to have been led from leadership from the South. Davidson hails from the northern side of the district, where he was an active leader in the Dayton Region Manufacturing Association, is a manufacturing business owner who is a strong pro-business advocate. These strengths make Congressman Davidson a strong leader for a manufacturing and military region like ours, and one who will bring common sense ideas to Washington from the Miami Valley. It is an honor to welcome him to the show today, and we look forward to him having a strong working relationship with our business community.